Tonight, the three-step path back to normal. The Prime Minister's plan out of restrictions, slowly easing towards the way things were. The country returning to work, deadline end of July. But in New South Wales, no immediate changes. Other states move, but the Premier still insists it's Mother's Day with restrictions. Shocking admissions from the company behind the Ruby Princess, while public servants concede they thought the ship was low risk. A close call at the White House. Donald Trump swabbed after a personal staffer tests positive. A huge fine for the man responsible for the gas mix-up that poisoned 2 newborns. Moving accounts on this VE Day. Aussie veterans recall the surrender of Nazi Germany 75 years on. And NRL stars stood down for refusing to have a flu injection.
Live from Sydney, 7 News with Michael Usher.
Good evening. The Prime Minister says we can, our Premier says we can't. Scott Morrison today laid out his 3-step, 3-month plan for a COVID-safe economy and a way out of restrictions. But Gladys Berejiklian says she needs the weekend to think about it and won't be giving our state an early mark for Mother's Day.
A man with a plan for Australia's re-emergence.
That's the plan for taking us forward.
The road to a post-COVID world dotted with risks, Scott Morrison says we have to take.
We've got to get out from under the doona at some time, and if not now, then when?
How soon and how quickly each state moves through the stages will be up to the premiers. The first step this month, with some businesses reopening, 5 visitors allowed in the home and 10 outside, including at restaurants and cafes, working from home if suitable, a return to the shops, local playgrounds, libraries, community centres, boot camps and home auctions, with local and regional travel allowed. And a return to the golf course, bowling green and pool, training for team sports and encouraging all schools and childcare centres to reopen.
Step 1 is tentative baby steps into normalisation.
The second step planned for next month. Most businesses reopening with gatherings of 20 people inside and out, including gyms. Cinemas, theatres, galleries, museums and amusement parks reopening with crowd restrictions. Beauty therapists back in business and some interstate travel resuming. The health data to be examined for 3 weeks after each stage.
We're going to have outbreaks. They are going to occur.
And when they do, the 3 T's.
Testing, tracing, trapping.
The third stage, the big one. All Australians back to work by mid-July with outside gatherings of up to 100 people. Food courts and saunas reopening. Flights to New Zealand and the Pacific Islands and international student travel possible. And pubs, RSLs and other clubs reopening with up to 100 patrons. For weddings and religious gatherings, 10 people in Stage 1, 20 Stage 2 and Stage 3, 100. For funerals in Stage 1, 20 inside, 30 outside, 50 in Stage 2 and Stage 3, 100. The plan's aim is to put 850,000 Australians currently on JobKeeper and JobSeeker allowances back to work by July, reviving Australia's wealth while protecting its health. Signalling a new normal with new rules.
No more heroics of coming to work with a cough and a cold and a sore throat. That's off the agenda for every Australian for the foreseeable future. Please.
Australia, the first to declare a pandemic, now among the first to re-emerge.
It's the fight we're winning, and it's the fight we'll continue to win together.
And political editor Mark Riley joins me now from Canberra. Mark, good evening. All encouraging, but that underlying concern, what happens if the reopening leads to a second wave of infections?
Yeah, Michael, good evening to you. That would be the nightmare scenario. And the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer are acknowledging that it is a risk. But they say the low rate of community transmission means it's a much lower risk now and one worth taking. They're confident that the experiences at Newmarch House and the Melbourne Meatworks show how effectively the health system can contain those sorts of localised outbreaks. But they still know that navigating this road back is going to take some strong leadership and a heck of a lot of good luck. Michael.
Indeed. All right, Mark Riley in Canberra, thank you. So, what does it all mean for New South Wales? The bottom line is no changes this weekend and possibly for the week ahead. That's according to Gladys Berejiklian late today. Bruised by both the Ruby Princess debacle and the deadly nursing home cluster, a cautious Premier just doesn't believe we're out of the woods yet.
Before the Prime Minister had even announced his new 3-point plan today, the Premier had put it on hold.
Any decisions that come out of National Cabinet won't be applied in New South Wales over the weekend.
For many, that meant disappointment.
it's turned out we're not opening tonight or tomorrow.
That's Packed to the Rafters star George Huvardis. He'd been hoping to pack his family cafe too.
We think of moving the restaurant to the Northern Territory, actually.
But his cafe colleagues up the road happy to wait.
I think if we're going to open, let's do it properly.
The Premier's position even reflected in this email to the state's biggest employer, the Public Service. Where you can and have been working from home, you should continue to do so.
So please stick to the existing rules.
It's making it very difficult for the community and business to understand what the hell's going on.
That's despite just 4 new cases overnight from 9,400 tests yesterday.
Another outstanding result.
One of those positives, a staffer from Newmarch, as authorities explained why daily tests there had been cut back to every second day.
Staff members were reporting some pain and concern, bleeding noses from the repeated swabbing.
More families arrived to visit today as the home came under enforced new management from independent advisor Andrew Kincaid.
What Mr Kincaid will be hoping to do is emulate the results achieved here. The Dorothy Henderson Lodge was in March the state's worst hotspot with 6 deaths. Today it was officially declared virus-free.
Already the aged care regulator has written to all families offering a helpline and this blunt admission. It's evident Anglican Community Services is struggling to make the required improvements.
Live now to Chris Reason. Chris, hello to you. The Premier remains unmoved on those restrictions.
She does. Good evening to you, Michael. The Premier issued a very short statement this evening, just 5 lines long, confirming that the state government welcomed the Prime Minister's new pathway, calling it a very clear and pathway to what citizens can look forward to, but only, she says, in coming months. Now, her spokesman tells me it's unlikely we'll see any change here until the beginning of next month, until June. So while they will give us plenty of warning, plenty of heads up, we'll be under these current lockdown conditions for at least the next 3 weeks. Michael?
Chris Reason on the harbour there. Thank you for that tonight. The Ruby Princess inquiry has heard damning evidence of the ship supplying wrong information about the extent of illness among its passengers. A Port Authority official said he asked whether the sickness was coronavirus. The answer was no.
March 8, delayed for hours, the Ruby Princess had to clear biosecurity questions just to leave Sydney. Today, an admission from Carnival answering there had been no sickness on board was incorrect.
You were aware there had been a problem with the ship giving a wrong answer to a health question?
A wrong answer had been given.
It was called an outright lie by a Ports Authority employee, with subsequent advice suggesting disembarkation should not have been allowed that day.
Instead, the health authorities allowed approximately 2,500 people who may have been contagious to just walk off the ship.
The inquiry heard Carnival executives Paul Mifsud and Valerie Burrows were insisting that morning it was not a COVID ship.
She'd mentioned to me that there were sick people aboard the Ruby Princess. I asked the question, are they COVID-19 related? And she said no.
I didn't know whether they were COVID or not.
That's not really my question. Do you recall saying that to him?
I don't recall, no.
Commissioner Brett Walker SC seemed increasingly agitated by a lack of direct answers. At one stage, he asked Carnival executives if it was desirable for them to have scotched any notion of COVID-19 being on board the Ruby Princess just to get passengers off. The answer was no.
I remember the response was they were not COVID related.
Richard Beasley SC also delivered a blistering attack on the Australian newspaper, threatening contempt of court for an opinion piece suggesting epidemiologist Kellyanne Ressler was just a patsy served up to a sham inquiry to protect government ministers.
Ms Ressler was an important witness for this commission.
Robert Ovadia, 7 News.
The early access to super scheme has been temporarily suspended, with police investigating up to 150 fraudulent withdrawals. The AFP commissioner believes the, quote, sophisticated breach could be linked to organised crime or overseas criminal syndicates. Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar today paused the scheme out of an abundance of caution while police investigate. More than 1.2 million Australians have withdrawn nearly $10 billion from their retirement savings. Up to $120,000 is believed to have been stolen. 13,000 travellers have been COVID quarantined in Sydney hotels in the last 40 days, with more arriving this morning. The Premier doesn't know how much it's costing, but says when it comes to keeping people safe, New South Wales has a no-regrets policy.
A perfect Sydney morning to be back home safe. The Qantas Dreamliner bringing nightmares to an end. Australians repatriated from India, relieved to escape its rising COVID crisis.
Yeah, we were, because the numbers are going really high there every day. So we're really happy to be back here.
It gets to a point where you just want to be home. You know, the kids are all sort of, wanting us to be there. Everyone feels a little bit insecure because we're not. 3
government-chartered flights bringing back 500 people, those lucky enough to get tickets.
Yes, very difficult. They sold out in like 20 minutes.
It's a bit like booking a ticket to a rock concert.
The vulnerable were prioritised along with short-term visitors and families with weary kids, showing all the signs of a rushed departure. But there are fears for those left behind.
I am concerned because I have old parents overseas.
The latest batch of repatriated Australians on their way to quarantine. Since the end of March, 13,000 people have been put up in Sydney hotels. Today's travellers went to city apartments for 2 weeks. 31 different Sydney hotels have been used for quarantining.
We've, for all intents and purposes, turned you into our front line.
At taxpayers' cost, the Premier today not sure how much.
And in fact, it's keeping our community safe, and we have a no regrets policy in New South Wales.
Chris Meyer, 7 News.
Retailers across Sydney are breathing a sigh of relief with a return to normal trading now on the horizon. Panic buying has subsided, with supermarkets lifting shopping limits as small businesses celebrate the light at the end of the tunnel.
Chairs dusted off at Le Grove Cafe.
We're open.
Owners hope customers could soon be allowed to sit down.
It just gives us a bit of a fighting chance.
Sales at the struggling Concord Florist beginning to blossom again ahead of Mother's Day.
You can see the street, there is not many people.
I guess there's a balance between people's safety and obviously, people's incomes.
And there's no surer sign of harmony than a toilet paper surplus. Woolworths proudly reporting sales dropped by 4 million rolls last week. Supermarket trading hours returning to normal from Monday, with restrictions on staples lifted.
Good now, you can go and get something you want.
Families are finally back at shopping centres, quiet for weeks.
In a single month of March, that retailers lost in our space certainly over $1 billion. We know that April was significantly worse than that.
Myer even reopening in Bankstown and Liverpool this weekend.
It's absolutely imperative that the anchor tenants trade because they bring in so much foot traffic.
The earlier they open, the better for everybody.
Some analysts say the hardest times are still to come for the retail sector. Government payments like JobKeeper offering struggling companies a few months of life support, but the end is inevitable.
I see September and October, when a number of those initiatives are scheduled to be unwound, as being the real challenge for the Australian economy.
The best medicine for business, some local love. Serena Andaloro, 7 News.
3 Queensland NRL players, including prominent anti-vaccination activist Bryce Cartwright, have been stood down after refusing to get the flu jab. One has already backflipped, but the NRL says the latest controversy won't stop the season from resuming in 20 days.
Bryce Cartwright, one of a group of players giving NRL bosses a case of pins and needles. The Titans back rower standing his ground, refusing to be vaccinated against the flu.
I know it's caused a big stir and it's not ideal, and I understand all of that, but it's Bryce's, choice to a certain extent.
In Queensland, no jab, no play. It's state government this afternoon standing down 3 players, Nathan Peets, Brian Kelly and Cartwright, for refusing the jab. But here in New South Wales, the rules are different. 7 News can confirm the flu jab was never a requirement for players upon their return to the game, despite the Premier's strong feelings.
We're not going to tolerate anybody. No individual, no organisation is above the health advice. I want to make that very clear.
Project Apollo, the team of experts tasked with getting the NRL back on its feet, met here at NRL headquarters today. On top of the agenda, flu vaccinations. The question is now, will the game adopt a no jab, no play policy?
It comes back to that safety issue, and if they think it is a really important point, I would support the NRL.
The NRL is confident the Queensland government will relax its laws and the 3 players will be given the green light to play again. Peter Fegan, 7 News.
John Barilaro's leadership is in a death spiral, according to National Party insiders, after what the Deputy Premier himself has described as a brutal week. And a former Deputy Prime Minister has weighed in, launching an attack over political self-centredness.
Deputy Prime Minister hopes gone. Could John Barilaro be fighting to remain Deputy Premier?
I think once you get into that death spiral, you've already got the juices of leadership aspirations being discussed.
Former Minister Kevin Humphries served 12 years as a Nationals MP, retiring last year. He predicts Mr Barilaro's time as state leader might soon be up as well.
The Deputy Premier's in a very difficult position.
Mr Humphries angry. His plea to the Nationals leader about water security has been ignored, while he and Minister Andrew Constance fought over the Eden Monaro by-election.
Did you call in the C word?
I'm not confirming nor denying.
Former Deputy PM John Anderson saying he's profoundly disappointed by the self-centredness both men displayed this week.
You know, people are disappointed. They want to see people working together.
Another senior Nationals figure lodged this formal complaint about Mr Barilaro with the party today. John Barilaro's supporters have urged Nationals not in Parliament to butt out, saying he has the party room's 100% support. The party's chairman is trying to organise an emergency executive meeting this weekend, calling on everyone to pull their heads in. Federal Nat Barnaby Joyce wants Mr Barilaro to quit, but only to run for the Nationals in Eden Monaro.
I believe that John is a person who can win seats, and therefore we must encourage him to do that.
Mr Barilaro says he won't change his mind and won't contest the next state election either.
If you're going to quit it in the next few years, quit now.
As for Andrew Constance, Michael, the Premier has punished him for his aborted tilt at federal politics. He's been demoted from the crucial government role as Leader of the House. Some of his Liberal colleagues hope and want and expect him to be dumped from the roads and transport ministries, as well as part of a broader ministerial reshuffle that's been foreshadowed post the coronavirus crisis. Mr Constance himself said today he didn't want to make any comment. He just wanted to get on with his job as the local member for Bega. Michael.
Alex Hart reporting there at State Parliament. Thank you. Well, there's been a major scare at the White House. The president's personal valet testing positive to coronavirus. Donald Trump says he remains negative, slamming the whole testing process as overrated.
A close call in the West Wing. One of Donald Trump's personal aides, a military valet who serves him meals, positive for COVID-19.
I've had very little personal contact with this gentleman.
The President and Vice President tested yesterday, again today. The result, negative.
Testing is somewhat overrated because what happens after somebody takes a test? What's going on there?
But reports suggest the valet's result had the President lava-level mad, angry that staff aren't doing enough to protect him. One insider calling it an operational failure, insisting everyone in close proximity to the President wear a mask. Testing will now be ramped up for White House staff from weekly to daily, as the President tries to keep the focus on putting Americans back to work. 1 in 5 are now unemployed.
The economy was considered Donald Trump's ticket to winning November's election, but there's growing concern in the White House the impact of the shutdown could now cost him a second term. The President was claiming a victory today and vindication after charges were dropped against his former national security advisor.
Michael Flynn was one of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's first scalps, pleading guilty to lying to the FBI about contacts with Russia.
And he was targeted in order to try and take down a president.
In New York, Paul Kadak, 7 News.
Time for a check now on our weather. Beautiful day, Brownie.
Oh, indeed, Michael. Yes, stunning conditions right across our city. Currently, as we look at the temperature, sitting on 22 degrees, while the wind, that's a moderate northerly. In fact, a northerly airstream dominates our state under a clear sky. But having said that, pressure's now starting to fall. As we go to the forecast chart, you'll notice a change starts to enter our state during the morning. This is it. It's been pushed along by a rather cold west to southwesterly airstream. Now, the system will bring some snow to the southern ranges. Can you believe it? We're expecting falls above 1,200 metres, potentially up to 20 centimetres. Back home, warm tomorrow ahead of that change. In fact, it is expected to become unsettled around about mid-afternoon. Clouds starting to build, as we can see. Might see a shower, possibly a thunderstorm in the outer west, but especially over the Blue Mountains. And, of course, I'll have the detailed weekend weather top of the hour, Michael.
Terrific, Brownie. Thank you. A hospital gas technician whose mix-up killed a baby has been fined. Next, hear the judge's scathing remarks. Plus, murder manhunt, a gangland killer still on the run, but now a vital clue in the nationwide search. Charges laid in the US over the deadly shooting of an unarmed jogger. Candid interview. The Duchess of Cambridge opens up about homeschooling and keeping the royals connected. And soon in sport, the Bulldogs coach thrilled with Kieran Foran's return to the training track. A gas contractor guilty of a mix-up that left one newborn dead and another with permanent brain damage has been fined $100,000. Christopher Turner falsely claimed he'd checked the gas bottles installed at a hospital that led to the babies being given deadly nitrous oxide.
All he had to do was check the fittings, but gas subcontractor Christopher Turner didn't bother, so that when the oxygen was turned on, 2 newborns were poisoned with laughing gas.
As a result of being administered nitrous oxide, John Gannam died at 12:51 p.m.
It was at Bankstown Lidcombe Hospital in 2016. Baby Amelia Khan survived, but was left blind with brain damage and epilepsy, needing 24/7 care.
In 43 years as a barrister and then a judge, I cannot think of a more tragic case.
Today, 58-year-old Turner was fined $100,000. Last week, gas company BOC was found not guilty over a series of incidents at Bankstown Lidcombe Hospital in 2016, which triggered a statewide audit of all gas outlets. It came too late for these devastated families. The Khan family, in a statement, said everyone, including the hospital, should be held to account, calling on Safe Work New South Wales to reopen its investigation. We must make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. In a statement, the Gannam family said they've long hoped for justice, and to a degree that has been achieved today. But no penalty will ever bring back their son. They live with that pain every day. Brian Seymour, 7 News.
Investigators have uncovered a vital clue in the nationwide hunt for a gangland fugitive. Homicide detectives found a missing Mercedes at a property in Melbourne's north, which belonged to murdered 26-year-old mother Ellie Price. They're searching for her boyfriend, Ricardo Barbaro. He's the brother of murdered Sydney crime figure Pascal Barbaro. An American father and son are tonight charged with murder 1 day after this confronting video emerged of them shooting an unarmed jogger in the US state of Georgia. Gregory McMichael, a former policeman, and his son Travis were taken into custody today, 2 months after they followed and confronted 25-year-old Ahmed Arbery. 34-year-old Travis shot him 3 times. Police say his father provided the cover, telling them Arbery resembled a robbery suspect in that area. The Arbery family calls it an execution, saying today the arrests are better late than never. A former staffer who accused Joe Biden of sexual assault is calling on him to drop out of the US presidential race. Tara Reid says she's been abused online since Biden publicly denied the allegation, calling it hypocritical that he still suggests female complainants should be taken seriously.
You and I were there, Joe Biden. Please step forward and be held accountable. You should not be running on character for the President of the United States.
Reid claims Biden assaulted her in a Senate hallway in 1993. It started as an art project but has gone a little nuts, particularly when you see a squirrel opening his laptop. There it is. Yep, a uni student on lockdown created tiny office sets outside her home to see if squirrels would participate in human-like activities. Turns out they did. It's been watched so much she's now keeping the experiment going online. Needless to say, she got an A. Well, the Duchess of Cambridge dropped her guard to give a rare TV interview exposing the realities of royal life in lockdown. Kate is also hoping everyone can follow her lead as an amateur photographer to capture the unfolding history we're all living through.
Royal visits are out, royal interviews are in.
We are delighted to be joined by Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge.
Kate on British Morning TV with an insight into homeschooling a prince and princess.
George gets very upset because he just wants to do all of Charlotte's projects, like making sort of spider sandwiches, as far cooler than doing literacy work.
And the truth behind those now traditional birthday shots of the Cambridge children by their mother. This was Louis last month.
I should have taken a photograph of what I looked like after that as well. I look like Louis at the end of this.
The Duchess has long been a keen amateur photographer, but now she hopes millions more can join her, capturing the faces and moments of the lockdown. A weary nurse, separated families, and fundraising hero Colonel Tom Moore. Britons are encouraged to take their own snaps for a project called Hold Still that will eventually become an exhibition.
To try and collate a portrait of the nation at this difficult time, I think is what I suppose inspired me.
Kate says the royal family has been keeping in touch with each other more than ever, with daily FaceTime calls. But like so many families with children, it's not been easy.
It's hard to explain to, a 5 and a 6, maybe 7-year-old what's going on.
So many families with stories to tell. In London, Hugh Whitfield, 7 News.
We're constantly being encouraged to get tested, but how does it work? Up next, behind the scenes at the country's biggest pathology lab, churning out results and keeping us safe. Plus, accountant charged the multi-million-dollar fraud scheme at an exclusive Sydney school. Why Rome's tourism industry won't be rebuilt in a day. And moving accounts from our World War II veterans recalling the moment victory was declared in Europe 75 years ago. A former finance manager at an elite Sydney school has been charged with stealing almost $7.5 million. Police say he lined his own pockets for years, racking up hundreds of fraudulent transactions.
Mariah College, known for its exclusivity and security, but police allege this man, Augustine Nosti, got around that. The former financial controller accused of stealing $7.4 million from the school's accounts.
They've employed somebody for such a long time who has taken advantage of the money, basically.
It's alleged to have happened over 15 years, 402 transactions in all, ranging from $2,000 a time to $241,000. Police say the money was sent directly from the Jewish college's accounts to Nosti's.
Was just able to obviously bury the transactions.
The school conducted its own investigation last year, then contacted police, notifying parents the assets of Augustine Nosti, his wife and sister-in-law remain frozen and conditions apply to his overseas travel. Steps are being taken to improve the college's controls and processes. Few there today would talk publicly.
I'm sorry, we're not allowed to comment on it.
Mr. Nosti wouldn't speak with media about the case at his home today as his legal woes pile up. He'll face those criminal charges in July, but he's also due in court next week for civil matters as the school tries to recover its money. A task that could prove impossible. Andrew Denny, 7 News.
The police chase has ended in a violent struggle with an armed driver. Body cameras were rolling as the pursuit ended. Officers rushing toward the car and came face to face with a loaded rifle.
Put it down! Put it down! Put it down!
The officers have been praised for putting their lives on the line and wrestling the gun away. The 54-year-old driver is facing a long list of charges, including drug, firearm and driving offences. Well, so far, more than 730,000 Australians have been tested for coronavirus, with just 1% positive. And tonight, we can show you the process from the swab to learning the result, and for urgent cases, it can happen as quickly as 2 hours.
This coronavirus testing machine is the latest technology, giving rapid results in the fight against the killer disease.
They could potentially do 1,600 or more COVIDs on this machine alone in one day.
Brought in to cope with the influx of thousands of tests already being done daily for coronavirus and to prepare for an expected surge in the coming weeks ahead.
If you can compare it with peak flu season, we've had some very big flu seasons in the last few years. I'd say it's been double those numbers.
This is where it begins for many, being tested in pop-up drive-through facilities around the country.
Okay, ready to go?
The samples taken from the car park straight to the lab, where it can undergo any of 4 different testing procedures. Here, technicians get to work separating out the specimen's DNA. They're then heated to 90 degrees, and 90 minutes later, results are known. The new machine automates a lot of processes that would otherwise be done by lab technicians. The goal? No false results.
But this main part of the laboratory is actually very quiet at the moment, and that's particularly concerning, they say, because right now there are 60,000 fewer people being tested every day for very serious conditions like diabetes, heart disease and cancer.
But the collateral damage we're concerned about is this significant drop in routine pathology.
Evan Batten, 7 News.
With hundreds of people still dying daily, Italian tourism bosses concede it could be next year before visitors can holiday there again. For one Australian mum living in Rome, the lockdown's been challenging, made harder by her concern about loved ones back home.
It's a joy for Alice Adams to be back in her studio.
Okay, let me show you.
Here, the cook and food stylist runs classes for international visitors. For now, it's family only.
Obviously, that's the part of my business that is gone, and we don't really know when it's going to come back.
The virus has devastated this country, but even at its peak, Australia was on Alice's mind.
When the curve just sort of went, I felt a lot of relief because my sister's a nurse and she drives an ambulance.
Italy is slowly easing measures, but still few shops are open, and schools, the first in Europe to shut down, won't take students until September.
Everyone wants to see their friends. Sometimes it's even a little bit difficult talking in front of a screen and not face to face in the real life.
The country may be in phase 2, but the streets of Rome still look and feel very different. No carefree crowds, but there are random police checks. Tourism bosses, though, remain hopeful that some visitors will be allowed back in time for summer. It's likely to be domestic tourists only. Internationals depends on airlines. 95% of Italy's hotels are still closed.
We like Australia. I hope that for the next year they will come, many of them, to our country.
The Eternal City will be waiting. In Rome, Sarah Greenhalgh, 7 News.
Sydney streets are set to be completely transformed to cater for social distancing. Next, how will it affect traffic and parking? Plus an urgent warning on an anti-malaria drug thought to treat COVID-19. Splish splash, look who's taking a bath. See a black bear having the time of his life in the tub.
Oh, summer-like warmth today, alpine snow tomorrow, weekend weather soon.
Let's have a look at finance news now. The ASX 200 ended a second straight week of gains. Lots more green on the board. News Corp making headlines with Chairman Rupert Murdoch foregoing his $3.1 million cash bonus as the business slashes costs. The dollar, it's strengthening, one Aussie dollar buying just over 65 US cents. Now, unleaded petrol still tracking upwards, heading back toward $1.12 a litre on average. Still plenty going cheap though. It's been selling for under 83 cents at the Liverpool Metro. Australians are being warned not to self-medicate with an anti-malarial drug touted as a potential COVID-19 treatment. At least 6,000 tablets of hydroxychloroquine have been seized by Border Force since January. The prescription-only drug has been found to be largely ineffective in treating coronavirus. Footpaths will be widened under a $15 million plan to give people more room to move as we emerge from the pandemic lockdown. But that means cutting into roads, a move slammed by the opposition with concerns it will increase traffic congestion.
Exercising at a distance, it's the problem many are facing as more and more Sydney-siders venture back outside. The government's answer, more space.
This is all about reconceptualising or rethinking of our roads as streets, as shared spaces.
They're calling it pedestrianisation, and it'll cost $15 million, money that will be handed to councils to make footpaths bigger and roads smaller.
For too long, I feel, our roads have been actually used to separate people.
But the real cost could be to traffic congestion, more chaos for drivers as the roadways shrink.
The reality is Sydney will always be a city that is driven by cars.
The plan is being trialled in 3 locations. George Street's car-free zone in the city will be extended between Bathurst and Campbell Streets. Cars will be cut off from Parramatta Park to make room for a People's Loop, and public furniture will be added in Liverpool's town centre. Also on the radar for spatial makeover, the Bay Run. through Haberfield and Lilyfield. Some of the money is also being spent on public furniture, including trees, bollards and park benches, even though we're still not allowed to sit down in public spaces.
It's like putting out tables and benches when you can't use it.
Yeah.
Then put me in front of food when I can't eat it.
Tom Saker, 7 News.
It's not a bad way to spend a day in isolation. Have a look at this. 10-year-old Dakota having a good old splash in nature while his zoo in Oregon remains closed. The keeper simply filled the tub and tossed in one or more of his toys, more than enough to lure the 180-kilo bear to that bath. Having a great time. Dakota was discovered orphaned and starving as a baby. He was nursed back to health and now very clearly has no confidence or any problems at home at all. Isolated in lockdown, but united by history. 75 years since VE Day, a very special Sydney commemoration. Mates with vivid memories share their stories. Tales of real true grit that you don't want to miss. It's coming up soon here on 7 News. But first, Jim Sabak with sport. Jim, good evening to you.
G'day, Michael.
Plenty happening at Belmore weeks before the season start.
Yes, Michael, good evening to you. Evening, everyone. Coming up, the Bulldogs are keen on luring a favourite son back to the club, while Kieran Foran has impressed the coach. Also ahead, the Dragons coach backs in battle for Jack de Belin, who faces an uncertain future. And our sports stars unite for a very special cause during the health crisis. That story is next. Welcome back, everyone. The Bulldogs remain very interested in luring favourite son Josh Reynolds back to Belmore. Coach Dean Pay says a deal would need to be done with the West Tigers, while Kieran Foran has been impressive on the training track, but the acid test is yet to come. He's managed just 26 games in 2 seasons, but this is a sight that has everyone at Belmore buzzing with excitement. Kieran Foran stretching out, and he could be a surprise starter for the Bulldogs in round 3 in a few weeks.
He'll jump into some more intensive training over the next couple of weeks. So that'll have a big bearing on whether he comes back in the next round of footy or not.
At the Dragons, coach Paul McGregor is adamant Jack de Belin deserves to be in the Red V squad despite an uncertain future. He'll face court on rape charges in early June.
Jack's a part of our top 30, so the guidelines were he was to be included. He's got a court case coming up, as we know, in June, as well as, the welfare around Jack.
While a trio of Titans players, Brian Kelly, Nathan Peets and Bryce Cartwright, was stood down under the advice of the Queensland Government this afternoon for not having the flu vaccination. Hours later, Peets had the flu jab.
The main thing for us is we're back training and that's the main thing. We want to get the game up and running May 28th. So whatever's needed to do that, we've got to adapt to whatever policies or procedures change, I think.
While the Storm continue a training camp in Albury, their players are doing their bit to engage with the club's fans with surprise phone calls.
How are you? It's Christian Welch here from the Storm. Fantastic. Just wanted to give you a quick call and say thanks so much for recommitting to the club.
The Storm will remain in Albury until at least early next week. Robbie Farah is putting his body to good work for a very good cause tomorrow morning. He's joined with Vision Personal Training to run an online class and raise money for Beyond Blue. All you have to do is donate, and you can train with a Tigers and Blues legend.
Physical training definitely makes you feel better mentally, and especially now during isolation where everyone feels like they're alone.
I'm just grateful that we can continue to serve the community and help people out with their mental health and also their physical well-being.
They hope at least 500 people join in. All the details are on Vision's Facebook page. The AFL is expected to announce the resumption of its season by Tuesday while they consider a restart. Swans co-captain Luke Parker has put his time to good use, joining one of Sydney FC's Socceroos stars at the Wayside Chapel.
Group photos are a challenge these days, but everyone here deserves credit for these good deeds.
The opportunity is great for us and a way to spend our time wisely off the field.
Craig Foster's Play for Lives campaign urged sports people to fill the void of volunteers who can't do their essential work. This time, they linked with the Wayside Chapel, delivering community care packages to be distributed from their Bondi Heart Cafe.
What have you got for us?
Anytime we can help out communities where we can and people less fortunate in a position where I'm able to play sport for a living, it's a great opportunity to jump at.
I'm just 2 streets away, so for me to not come down here and help out when I can would be a little bit silly.
For now, Luke Parker's Swans still train solo, like Tom Papley, or in pairs, like Sam Reid and Nick Blakey this morning.
Hopefully it's looking about 2 or 3 weeks away from when we can actually get into smaller groups and start preparing to get back to playing.
The A-League won't resume until July or August. Ryan Grant's Sydney FC are cruelly close to sealing a 4th premiership.
We've been given a sort of a blueprint for a start back up date, which is nice now, but still a couple of months away, so hopefully we can get back into it as soon as possible and wrap it up and be Sydney FC be champions again.
But today, they're champions with the Wayside Chapel, and we're lucky to have sports stars like them. Matt Carmichael, 7 News.
Some big races around the country tomorrow, and you'll see them right here on 7, along with Adelaide and Melbourne. 7 will also broadcast all Sydney races for the next 6 Saturdays, including tomorrow's meeting at Royal Randwick.
It was a hard thing to do to get all the racing jurisdictions to come together, but it has happened, so it's a real breakthrough in a way, and to have Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide for the next 2 weeks, and then Brisbane coming in with their carnival.
Bruce and the team will start our coverage tomorrow morning on 7-2 from 11:30 and then right here on 7 from midday. Can't beat live sport, Michael. I'm going to have a few days off. I'll see you next week, mate.
Oh, we'll see you then, Jim. Have a break.
Good on you, mate.
Well, today, May 8, is the 75th anniversary of VE Day, the end of World War II in Europe with the surrender of Nazi Germany. A commemoration limited by the lockdown, but marked in Sydney by a special video event.
Rear gunner Max Barry knows where he was 75 years ago.
On the 8th of May, I was in the Stalag 3 prison camp.
His Lancaster bomber shot down over France just 4 days after D-Day. One of several Aussie veterans telling their stories on this VE Day, like navigator Bill Gagan.
We were glad the whole thing was over.
Wireless operator Tony Adams.
We were supplying the French resistance movement.
Air gunner Peter Watson.
And the fear of being shot down.
Remarkable memories still fresh now for all to hear.
And this is because of what was happening over in Europe.
The government determined they won't be forgotten.
Nearly 1 million Australians went and served in World War II. 39,000 were killed.
So many, so young. Tony was one of 20 Aussies in his group. 8 were lost.
Of the 8 that were killed, 5 were aged 20.
May 8, 1945 couldn't come soon enough.
I felt a great sense of relief that the war was over.
Over in Europe, victory in the Pacific would wait until August. There's more on the New South Wales War Memorial's website. Patrick Burns, 7 News.
David's back now and he has the latest forecast. Brownie, what's in store for the weekend?
Michael, a change is on the way. Snow on the Southern Ranges tomorrow. And, of course, I'll have your forecast straight after the break.
Tonight's 7 News headlines. The Prime Minister lays out a 3-step plan for Australia's safe road out of lockdown. But restrictions will remain in place in New South Wales for at least the weekend. A cautious Premier concerned we're not out of the woods yet. And have a look at this. Our cameraman Tim Stewart's just captured these spectacular shots of a supermoon rising over the harbour. Looking good there, Brownie.
Certainly is.
Here's the weather.
Yes, thanks very much, Michael. Well, it's been a beautiful day right across our state. In fact, here in the city, almost summer-like warmth. But there is a change on the way. In fact, today's top, there it is, 28.5 degrees. And by the way, that's about 8 degrees above the long-term average for this time of year. You'll notice high 20s were the order of the afternoon for most of the metro area. But high in the Blue Mountains, it was a much cooler day. Katoomba maxed out with 18 degrees. The latest satellite data highlights clear sky across most of our state. Pressure is falling. This is the change we're expecting. It's driving thunderstorms as it approaches the southwest corner of Victoria. The system itself, as it moves over our state, will start to whip up some rain and thunderstorm activity, mainly along the western slopes of the Great Dividing Range, also along the spine as well. Snow is expected to fall on the southern ranges above 1,200 metres. And of course, there will be some thunderstorms in this system as it moves through. Around the nation tomorrow, of course, down south in Melbourne, cold and showery in this cold air mass. Around 15 degrees, some hail and thunder is also likely. On the other side of the change, warm and sunny in Brisbane, around 27 degrees as we head further north to the top end. Clear skies in Darwin and the forecast maximum 34 degrees. For us, a strong wind warning is up and running for the central and southern coast tomorrow. You'll notice that patchy rain and isolated thunderstorm activity unfolding as the day wears on, being pushed along by this rather cold air mass that's sweeping in from the west to southwest. we are also expecting the odd thunderstorm to slip into our neck of the woods. I think it'll happen around about mid-afternoon. Most of it contained to the outer west and also along the Blue Mountains as well. Quite warm, though, ahead of that change. Cold air will fill the Sydney Basin tomorrow night. We are expecting rough seas for our coastal waters, that westerly change pushing through after sunset, running at around about 20 to 30 knots for the city. A warm high, 27 degrees. Let's move on to the next 7 days. Different story on Sunday. Cool and sunny, only 19 degrees, remaining dry as we progress through most of next week. Coastal showers are likely, well, on Thursday and Friday. That's the latest weather, Michael. Enjoy the warmth while it lasts.
Great for Mother's Day as well.
It certainly is.
All right, Brownie, thank you. And that is 7 News for this Friday. We'll have updates for you throughout the evening. I'm Michael Usher. From all the team here, thank you so much for your company. Have a terrific Friday night.